Welcome, everyone. My name is Jess Sands. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be the MC for this evening. Ow, ow! I'm so happy you're all here. TSNE Mission Works, we are happy that to be co-sponsor, let's start over. We are here at TSNE Mission Works are happy to be co-sponsoring and hosting an event for 2019 Fierce Urgency of Now event. This time last year, I was sitting right where you are, attending the first iteration of this event, valuing our workforce, how the nonprofit sector can support millennials of color, and I thought, wow, this is a place that I want to get to know. 1 year later, fast forward, and here I am, helping to wrangle this event that you are attending right now, and I'm super pumped to be here for it. I'm gonna go over a few logistical information questions here, and then we'll hand it over to our fearless leader, Elaine. So we will be live streaming this. So from 5 to 7, it's gonna be real official in this general area. As you can see, we have live captioning. So if you can pause for the mic before you say something so they have time to catch up. Because I'm not doing a great job of that because I'm a fast talker, but. Photos will be taken, so if you do not want your mug in our photo, please let me know, and we will be very mindful of that. We have bathrooms that are gendered on this floor, and we have one non-gendered bathroom on the 4th floor. We have a lactation room and a parenting room on the 4th floor as well, but you need a key to it, so please see me if you need that. That's it, and the captioning on the mic, so thank you so much for being here and sharing this time and space with me. I am so grateful for each and every one of you that are here. And Elaine, without further ado.
Thank you, Jess. I am super impressed by the live captioning because I always think, is there a gremlin somewhere that's like typing really, really fast? But welcome, everyone. I think it's a real pleasure for TSNE to be one of the kickoff events for the First Urgency of Now conference, and we have an amazing panel. They're all sitting in front of me. It's amazing, young leaders, not so young maybe, but all doing kick-ass work, right, in our city. So I'm going to hand it over to them shortly, but just before doing that, I just wanted to say this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because believe it or not, at some point in time, I was also a young leader of color. And it was a while ago, but at that stage, and let's just say it's over 10 years, I would have loved to be in a room with this many amazing young leaders of color, and I didn't have that. And for you all to be in this space and to share your stories and your journeys and your trials and your triumphs is something that's remarkable and incredible and only helps to make us all better. So thank you all for coming and for being part of this and for taking the lead in the leadership that is changing the face of this city and the face of our populations and the people that we all care so much about. So give yourselves a round of applause for that. So I also want to say that, at TSNE, this past year, I've been in my position now for a little over a year. And this past year, we've really tried to focus in sharply and really understand how TSNE supports leadership, particularly leadership of color. And one of the things that we've just recently finished, or one of the reports we just recently finished is called Moving Beyond the Person. And it's a learning report about our thinking around the ongoing mass retirement of the baby boomer generation. So I am in Generation X. And my generation was kind of passed over because baby boomers are still in their jobs now, a vast majority. So, for many folks, especially folks of color who are in the sector and all sectors, there wasn't necessarily the opportunities for us to step up into leadership roles because we still had predominantly white leaders in their 60s, 70s, 80s sitting in their jobs. So, in many respects, like my generation missed a lot of leadership opportunities. But the great thing is that now your generation has the opportunity to really take those seats and to move things forward. And in our Moving Beyond the Person report, we really try to draw the straight line between the opportunity and the nexus point, the inflection for us as a sector in leveraging this opportunity of the retirement of predominantly white baby boomers to really provide a foundation and a scaffolding so that you all can succeed in a very different way that didn't exist for folks who are in Generation X. So I'm really looking forward to the sea change. That's, you know, the numbers say it. People don't live forever. People can't work forever, right? So it'll be a massive sea change where our leadership in the city is just going to dramatically look different. So please, please, please keep everything that you're doing. Take time to rest and recover and rejuvenate, because it's not a sprint. This is really a race that we're engaged in, and a marathon. Sometimes it feels like 4 marathons back to back. But definitely keep plugging away and keep doing what you're doing, because you know your work gives me hope and helps me keep going too. So without any further ado, I think I'm going to pass it over to, because I can keep talking about this topic, I'm really seriously passionate about it, but I'm going to hand it over to the panel because the panel has so many more exciting things to share. And first, I'm going to introduce Yolanda Cointreau, who is the president and CEO of the Institute for Nonprofit Practice. And I am blessed to actually call Yolanda a friend as well as a colleague. And she is one of the strongest, smartest, most successful, dedicated, and intentional women of color I've had the privilege to both know as a person, but to also work with professionally. So it's my really great honor to have Yolanda come up here and to introduce the panel and to moderate for you tonight.
Okay, love when I get started by crying. So feelings mutual, Elaine, as you know. It's such an honor to have the opportunity to facilitate this panel today. I'm most excited about the fact that everything I'm asking today was actually created by you. And so these questions are really for the people by the people, and I'm simply the one who gets to put a voice to them. So thank you for your engagement in helping us shape today's event. I was asked to kind of just tell you a little bit about myself. So first, what's the Institute for Nonprofit Practice? We are actually a partner of TSNE Mission Works, and we run our classes here in this space, as well as other locations throughout New England. And we're working to build a transformative movement of diverse, ready, networked, nonprofit leaders across New England and now across the country. We're launching in New York right now as we speak. And we really want to see the face of leadership change. And this room is particularly special for me. It feels like home. It feels like what the room should look like in a sector that serves rooms just like this every single day. And it's really such an honor to be at the helm of this place that transformed my career. So as Elaine said, for her, this is personal for me too. I actually really hit a ceiling in my career, which I imagine a number of you here are kind of thinking about, where do I go next? Who will help lift me up? What do I do? I was really doing well as a director, middle manager for years, for almost 9 years. Did a great job, so no one helped me think about how to move on, because they would have loved to keep me there forever, right? And I thought that I had really made it. I was doing better than both of my parents combined. And I was a big success in my family. And I had the opportunity to meet the founder of the Institute for Nonprofit Practice one day by chance through a colleague of mine. And he invited me to come to the Institute. And I was like, great, sounds like I can go for free. My job's gonna pay for it. And sure, I like to learn. So I was on board, not really knowing what I'd experience from there. But what I experienced is many of the things that I was missing were provided to me there that show up in the report as gaps, and also in the Building Movement Project report as gaps for young leaders, for leaders of color, for women in leadership, which were, I got to meet people and build a network. I got social capital. I got validation from my leadership. I saw my potential in other people like me rising and gained some hope. And I found a path to leadership, and within 6 months, I was in my first executive role, and the rest is history. Our founder did what every baby boomer should do, which was looked for the next person to take his spot as a Jewish founder who wanted the organization to be represented by the people that it served. And he tapped me. And so he carved every path for me, made every connection, and laid the groundwork when no one else would have given me this job. I hadn't raised millions of dollars. Sure, I had leadership experience and knowledge, obviously, but a lot of people on those almost all-white boards, 84%, if you've read the report by TSNE, would have looked me over, and he didn't. And so now, INP is 4 times the size, and we're scaling nationally, and the rest is history, and a lot of you are in our program, or our graduates. In fact, some of our panelists, which I'm really excited about. So let me move to that and tell you who they are. So I'm going to introduce them just briefly, but they're going to tell you a little bit more about what they do and a little bit about their journey. So we'll go in alphabetical order here. So Carolyn Chu, Executive Director of Asian American Resource Workshop. You want to come up and take your seat? Get a big round of applause. Fearless leaders in our sector. Let's make sure I can actually go in alphabetical order. Elijah Evans, I believe you're up next, Executive Director of Bikes Not Bombs. Kendra Hicks, Director of Radical Philanthropy at Resist Foundation. And Chevelle Olivier, Executive Director of Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. Okay, so where to begin? We had talked about, so this is what happens when people with short legs sit on tall stools. Now you know we live streamed this, which is awesome. All right, so if we could kick off and really just kind of go down the row, or if you feel inspired to just jump in, please do. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at your organization, but I'm particularly interested in what's your end game where you work. We're going to start with Elijah. All right.
All right. So my name is Elijah Evans. I'm the executive director at Bikes Not Bombs. To tell you a little bit about Bikes Not Bombs, 1984, 35 years ago, an administration not unlike the current one was embroiled in a lot of scandals, one of which was Iran-Contra. That was where our government was selling weapons to Iran, using the funds to fund a civil war in Nicaragua, throughout Central America, et cetera. And our founders were vehemently against that. They were bike mechanics, they were activists, and their first act was to get on a plane and go to Nicaragua and start a bike shop there, believing that bicycles not only can be something we use as children, but also really addressing some of the most pressing issues that we face. So in creating a bike shop, it primarily served the disabled community. Those folks would probably not be able to find employment otherwise, and so it really became a formula to really uplift the community and put them at the center of that solution. And so taking that approach in Nicaragua, our founders came to Boston, and in 1990 we started doing that same programming for young people here, really countering the violence that was rampant throughout Boston. And then 4 years later, in '94, we opened our bike shop. And so that really makes up all the different parts of Bikes Not Bombs. We've shipped over 80,000 bicycles to 14 countries over the last 35 years, which is amazing. We have also, thank you, we've served over 4,000 young people, one of which was me, starting as a 14-year-old in the Earn a Bike program. And we've reclaimed so many bicycles out of the waste stream, really encouraging people to use it as a way to uplift themselves. So a little bit about me. So I started at Bikes Not Bombs when I was 14. Since then, I've been a youth participant, a youth staff member, youth manager, director, board member, and now executive director. Bikes Not Bombs has really seen my growth, and I've also really seen the growth of Bikes Not Bombs to a small $500,000 organization to the organization that we are today. We're a little over $1 million. So I'm really excited to be here and share my story, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Kendra, you want to go? We'll just keep going down the line. Come back to Carolyn.
I'm on.
You're on.
So similarly to Elijah, Resist was started in 1967 as a response to the Vietnam War. And so our founders actually wrote the Call to Resist Illegitimate Authority in 1967, and that's where our foundation was born. And so the hope of our founders was to fund the resistance, to give money to real grassroots groups who were on the front lines of the civil rights movements and all of the movements that come thereafter. And so Resist has a very near and dear place to my heart because they're also the foundation. They were one of our first funders at Beantown Society, which is a nonprofit organization that I'm the co-founder of. And it's the place that gave me my first executive director job. So similar trajectories. Resist is a national foundation, and so we fund hundreds of grassroots groups all over the country in all 50 states and US occupied territories. We give away close to $700,000 every year, and we are led by a grant-making panel, which is made up of the grantees that we fund, and they make all of the decisions on where all of the funding goes every year. And so I'm the director of radical philanthropy, and so in my role, I am tasked with doing all of the fundraising at Resist. Resist is a grassroots foundation. We don't have an endowment. We don't have a family who gives us money. So every dollar that comes in, we have to fundraise every year to redistribute out to the people in the movement. I started as the director of grants for the eastern region of the country, and 2 years ago transitioned into my new role. That's all that I have. And what's my end game at Resist? What's my end game?
Yeah.
Resist is a worker, self-directed nonprofit, which means that we have a flat structure. And so in my role currently, I am a co-executive director of the organization. And so my hope is to be at Resist for a little while longer, a shorter time, and prepare somebody else to take the mantle of co-executive director of the organization.
Thank you. Chevelle.
So again, my name is Chevelle, and I have note cards with me because I do have to prepare. So you'll see me looking down, but I am going to look at the crowd as well. I'm 27 years old, and I live in Mattapan. Been a Mattapan native for 15 years. I am the executive director for Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. We were founded in 2006 by a group of individuals who lived in Mattapan who were concerned about the health and wellness of the Mattapan community. Obesity, diabetes, hypertension were their main priorities when developing this organization. And about 13, 14 years later, we're still here. Mattapan Food and Fitness is a grassroots organization. We are really, really grassroots. Until I became the ED, we were all volunteer-based. So right now, I am the only staff person, and everybody else has a full-time job. One of my board members is here, Rianne. We all have full-time jobs, but then the board members or our leadership team, they do take time out of their jobs outside of that to really try to do activities and programming to help the wellness and physical activity of Mattapan. Sorry, just getting a little nervous. So on the physical activity side, our youth focus on biking. We lead an event called Mattapan on Wheels. We also do some physical activity at our community gardens, such as Zumba, yoga, things like that. On the healthy eating side, we run the Mattapan Square Farmers Market. It's in its 14th year. And our youth also do a farm stand in front of our local community health center. And we do oversee and help to support 2 community gardens in the area. We have a staff size of 3, so we're all part-time, and we work with all age levels. And so my end goal, or end game with Mattapan Food and Fitness, since we're so small, getting an ED is life-changing for us right now, and so I'm really hoping that I'll be able to devote all of my time into building up the Mattapan Food and Fitness and giving it some structure and foundation so we can grow.
Awesome. Thank you. And don't be worried about being nervous. We're all nervous, so it's good. Thank you. That was great. All right, Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so my name's Carolyn Chu. I'm the executive director of the Asian American Resource Workshop. We were founded in 1979 and really founded out of the Asian American movement of the 1970s. Throughout our history have had many forms, but have always been primarily an organization for Asian American young adults, 1.5 second plus generation folks across ethnicities to come together, build community, build political power, and kind of create new arts and culture work, new organizing campaigns that change conditions, and different things. So, you know, kind of in the earlier iterations of ARW, particularly when immigration looked different, right? When who was here, who was Asian was different. It was really, we were in Chinatown for 30 plus years. We were doing media work before there was any Asian American representation in media. We were supporting Chinatown organizing against gentrification and against violence that was happening in the community. And you know, I think over the years there's been many questions of who are we, who do we want to be as an organization, what does the movement need from us at any moment, and through that there have been many ups and downs. Our fearless founders came back and whenever they needed to be the interim executive director, and I give them a lot of credit, you know, I think to step forward when needed, but not overstep. I think, you know, it is a delicate balance. We need that continuity and that history, and we need folks to be able to let things grow into different spaces. And so, yeah, in the past, I've been at ARW for 6 years. And really, before I came on, maybe in the last like 8 or 9 years, we had real questions about how are we going to be financially sustainable? How are we going to serve our best role in the movement? And through that, we started doing work with Southeast Asian young adults, particularly in Fields Corner, to build organizing capacity. And now are really organizing around issues across Asian ethnic groups, right? Creating inter-ethnic solidarity around issues of displacement, so gentrification, deportation, and criminalization that affect different parts of the Asian community. And yeah, I came out of youth service work when I was in college, and loved working with young people, and also really wanted to understand what it looked like to organize, to change and build power, right? And to make the world that the young people I love so much, particularly in Fields Corner, to make the world look different for them, right? And so that kind of brought me to ARW and to learn what organizing was, and I've been lucky to be part of not just the Asian American organizing community, but the broader Boston organizing community that has really like invested in me and our organization and let us grow into this kind of new role. And I think, you know, as we move forward, I don't know what, I'm committed to seeing the organization into this new stage, and I don't know what that means for my role long term, but, you know, I definitely, every time things that I thought were just kind of little ideas in my head, seeds I planted, when they become not my idea, right, those are the best moments, when it's not, when my name has nothing to do with something. I feel like, you know, I hope we get to a place with the organization where these ideas I've had or the board have, they really have ownership by our member leaders. We're a member-based organization, and that, you know, it can grow beyond even the ideas I can see in front of me now.
Awesome. Thank you. So you've all touched on some structural issues and structures that existed that maybe created condition for success or didn't. So we're going to come back to that. Just want to let you know, so now you know who these amazing people are, and to give you a sense of the evening. So I'm going to ask a few more questions that are your questions, but then you're going to ask your own questions. So start thinking about that, and we'll keep really good time here so that we can open the floor and make sure that this goes in the direction that you're hoping. I'm sorry to have my back to so many of you over there. So maybe you could share, we'll kind of do one more round of all of you speaking and then we'll jump around a bit. But if you could share a moment, you know, I mentioned the moment for me that was pivotal in moving into leadership. What was it for you? What was the piece in your journey that changed the game for you? Great, Chevelle, go ahead.
Sorry, just waiting for the mic to turn on. So aside from my leadership team trusting me and being the ED of the organization, another game-changing opportunity was really small, but when I was thinking about this question, I realized that I feel like that all of the things I've done from this conversation that I had led me here. So I was coming back from Hannaford's, which is a grocery store, getting some refreshments for our Mattapan on Wheels event, and I was with our board chair, Vivian Morris. And I was about maybe 22 or 23 at the time, and I asked her a question because she lets me ask any question that I love and that I like, and so I asked her the question, do you get paid for the work that you do? This was before I knew anything about nonprofit terminology, what a board chair was, what board members do, anything like that. And she answered no, she didn't get paid for anything that she did. And my mind was blown. I was like, wow. I said wow because she was literally and still is all over the place. Every MFFC event that we had, she's there. Anything community related, she's there. Anything that has to do with the community, again, she's there. And I thought that, you know, Mattapan Food and Fitness was her full-time job. And since then, I started volunteering my time with the organization. I was in college, so I volunteered being the youth coordinator for the coalition, and I volunteered my time being the youth program director, and I also volunteered my time being a co-chair, which you're supposed to volunteer your time. And through that volunteerism, I've worked on my public speaking skills, grant writing skills. I met a lot of people, a lot of networking. She took me to a lot of conferences, different people's house, different career fields that I was introduced to. And because I took on the thought of, okay, volunteering my time, I got to meet and do so many different things, and I think that it led me here to being an exec director and being here in front of you all right now.
Thank you.
I had, there were a number of moments, but I think that along my trajectory, the thing that really set me up for success was mentorship. I always think about my trajectory towards an executive director as starting when I was 14, when I got my first mentor. And from that age, the people that were in my life saw something in me that made them want to pour into me, right? And so I think that, you know, the thing that changed everything was that moment where people took an interest in me and poured into me. I have 5 mentors, all for different things and the same thing and overlapping things. And those people have taught me, but also been my advocates. And so, you know, for that reason, I've always been the youngest at this, the first to do that, because there are people who are brilliant and are much more experienced than me, who have taught me things very early on and have prepared me earlier than, you know, people are typically prepared to take things on. And so that's really a game changer for me. And if folks, you know, if you don't have mentorship, like, now is the time. Yesterday was the time. But one of the things that was like really a game changer for me was graduating from INP. I went to the institute.
That was not done on purpose.
I was like, oh, I'm the grad. I'm the IMP graduate. You know, I have worked since my first job, I have worked in nonprofit organizations. I'm a co-founder of a nonprofit organization. I have never worked at any other place that's not a nonprofit. And so in my career, I have put 15 years in the nonprofit sector. And so when I learned about IMP and I interviewed with Yolanda, I actually applied for the Community Fellows Program. And Yolanda and I had a meeting and she said, I think you might want to do the other one. And so it was, and that's what I did. And you know, when you talk about the Institute for Nonprofit Practice, about being like a well-networked place, that's really what happened for me. And I was able to not only grow professionally because of the Institute for Nonprofit Practice, but the network of people that I had access to now was so different that I was able to build a lucrative consulting practice outside of that. And I have had at least 5 of my class members bring me into their organizations to consult for them. And so that's also been really transformative because it positioned me as a leader in my field at the same time. So, yeah.
And a quick note on that, so what's the other program she went into? It's for leaders, for executives. And what we've found actually is that a lot of times leaders of color come in and they place themselves in the spot where the people with the least experience are. And so what we're often doing is saying, no, you belong in the room with the top dogs. That's where we want you. And so that's why Kendra and I had the discussion. I was like, you know about social justice. Can you hear me? You don't need to learn about social justice and build that community. You need to go lead Boston. And so who do you need to be in a room with? And thankfully, she accepted that invitation, because if she said no, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. But that worked out okay. But I think it's an important point just to emphasize, to not sell yourself short and make sure that people open the doors for you and give you the seats that you deserve along the way, and that there's somebody, you've both now talked about mentors, who helps build that path. So if folks have questions about mentorship, ask them for sure in a bit. All right, Elijah or Carolyn, who's up? All right, go.
All right, so the game-changing opportunity for me happened at Bikes Not Bombs. And so when I was 18 years old, I started college, and it so happened that it happened to be a transition year for Bikes Not Bombs. One of our full-time youth program staff members decided that he wanted to start a family, wanted to move to Western Mass, and there was no one else really on staff who had as much or enough experience to really take on the responsibility of running the programs that he was running. And so I saw it as an opportunity for me to really step up and take advantage of a role that I knew I could do. I had built trust with the organization. There was still a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not I could really fulfill the job. I was also going to college full time, so there's some just like logistical questions that are understandable, but it really turned out to be a game-changing opportunity for me because I'm still with Bikes Not Bombs, and it really helped shape the leadership skills that I developed and that I continue to rely on today. Part of that experience, I want to just kind of delve a little bit deeper. So when I came on staff in 2007, 2008, we hired a new executive director, and that executive director stayed for about 3 years and really helped turn around the organization. We were in a crisis because of the recession, and it really had a profound impact on us. Unfortunately, when she decided to transition, it put us in a pretty tough situation again. This time, though, it was about how we would sustain the growth that we had achieved. TSNE Mission Works actually provided us with an interim ED, invaluable resource that really helps organizations transition. And it really helped give us the time to really find a leader who could help carry us forward, and we did. And I had a huge role in not only participating in that process, but also just learning what it would take to run an organization without an ED that you can rely on being there for more than the year that they're committed to. And so that also was an opportunity for me to step up and really learn what it takes to be an ED. And even after that, I wasn't ready. I ended up enrolling in IMP. The Community Fellows Program gave me access to a network of people, some of which I'm still in touch with, but more importantly, I think it kind of gives you the validation that you need in order to take those risks when those opportunities come up, when there's a vacuum in leadership, and when you're kind of the right person to step up and you just need the right encouragement to do so. So I really appreciate IMP for that, and I encourage all of you guys to look into that if you're interested in executive leadership.
Thank you. Also not intended part. Thank you, though. Thank you. All right, Carolyn.
Yeah.
You're the grand finale. No pressure on this one.
And I just wanted to note that, like any good millennial, I took my notes on my phone. So, so if I have my phone in my hand, that's all it is. I'm not checking something, but just Evernote. But yeah, I think 3 things. Just hearing other folks talk, I'm thinking about. One is, I think, being asked, right? So someone asked me to take over, and of course, at first I was like, no, and then I was like, 1 year. And here we are, and I don't know when I'll leave. But, I think just being asked, right, and having that conversation, I think is critical, right? And I think it's so what you said, Yolanda, who gets asked, right, who sees themselves in those roles, and how do we make sure we're asking folks to step up, and scaffolding that for them, but, that people are being asked. And the other thing is, yeah, I agree around mentors and just friends who get it. I mean, I have a lot of friends, both folks my age and older than me, who are executive directors or who are former executive directors. And, we're just constantly talking and freaking out and trying to figure out if those grants are checks are ever gonna come in, and if, how to support our staff better. And I think just people who understand what you carry every day is so important to me, and sustaining it, and just feeling part of, especially a community of women of color who are trying to figure it out, right? And then the third thing, now I forgot, is a group on staff. So like Chevelle, when I came in, I was the only full-time staff. We had full-time staff in the past, but because of budgetary reasons, I was the only full-time person. And then when I became the executive director, I was still the only full-time person, and it felt so isolating. It felt so, I was like, I don't know how long I can do this, but as we were able to bring on people, and there's a real community of other staff people, as well as board members and members, of course, but other people whose day in and day out is the work, I think I was suddenly like, oh my God, when I feel like I'm part of a community here, I feel like I can do so much more, and we can all do so much more than we could. So I think, there's the executive director title, but there's also how do you create that kind of staff community, and how do you get the organization to a place where you can? Because I am 100% sure that I would have only stayed 2 years if we hadn't been able to hire anyone else, because you have no thought partner, right? And having thought partners is the most important, both inside and out of your organization. I feel like it has, for me, has been the most game-changing important part of my work.
Awesome, thank you. So Elijah and Chevelle, maybe you could take this one, but I heard you both kind of talk about volunteering, working, leading in your organizations, and I'm wondering what you take into your leadership from your experiences before, on the ground, if you will, and I know the ED job is on the ground and above ground, all that, but as you think about, what you're bringing with you to today, what's that perspective? How does it shape how you lead?
All right, so when I'm asked this question, I do look at it as from a personal growth perspective, because being with and working with Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, having a group of 7 to 8 strong African American West Indian ladies to support me in whatever it is that I was doing, I can't help but take that perspective. I did lose track of the question, so can you please ask it again?
So what, from being in more of a volunteer and kind of learning role, are you bringing now to being the leader?
So what I'm bringing now into being a leader is being patient. Because my leadership team was patient with me when I was going through this journey from being a vigorous youth when I was 17 years old, and then 10 years later being the ED, I'm taking patience. I'm also taking the time to get to know each and every person that I connect with, because my leadership team took the time to understand me and connect with me. I'm also taking the time to we have a youth group called the Vigorous Youth, and I'm also taking the time to let our youth group explore their creativity, just like, again, my leadership team did with me. They wanted to do a bike repair workshop, and so we let them do the curriculum there, we let them do the research, we let them pick the date, the time, the place, so just letting them be creative, because my leadership team did that with me. So again, what I'm bringing with me to this leadership is patience, letting people lead when they want to, and then just listening to others as well.
Thank you. Elijah?
So what I think about when I hear that question is, what are some of the challenges that persist maybe that what I can think of when I hear that question is challenges that are related to our mission, and how do I bring a different perspective or voice to the table, because we know that in the industry, the cycling industry, in our nonprofit, it's been predominantly white men that have dominated their conversations, decisions, et cetera. And I think making an effort to make sure that that my voice is heard. It's obviously a lot easier now being in this role to make sure that my perspective and the perspective of people who think like me are voiced. But certainly, I think as a volunteer, kind of moving my way up in the organization, I had to really advocate for the needs of our constituents in a way that I think shifted the dynamic within the organization. We're still, figuring that out, struggling with it, and persevering. So part of what has helped me do that is challenges within Bike Stop Bombs. It's also been informed by my experience as a medical student, my experience just being a cyclist in general, right? There aren't many cyclists of color, and that's a systemic issue. It's an institutional issue, and one that I think our organization, if we are to achieve social justice, which is in our mission, we really need to make sure we're taking into account the people who are directly affected by the work that we do. So I think advocating for those voices is something that I continue to strive to do.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause or some snaps for sure. So, Kendra, we were just having a conversation earlier about the structure at Resist and how structure can shape the opportunity for everybody to thrive and for the organization to thrive. And so I'm wondering, maybe you could share with everybody a little bit more about that co-director structure and what you think it solves and where are the challenges within it.
Yeah, sure. So when I started working at Resist 5 years ago, we already had a flat structure, but it was just flat without any actual structure.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the lack of hierarchy does not a collective make. Lesson number one. And so we had to learn a lot of lessons from having, not having hierarchy, but not having a collective structure to do our work. And that took some transition. And so 2 years ago, we worked with the Anti-Oppression Resource Training Alliance, AORTA, and Autumn Brown came and facilitated a retreat with the staff at Resist, because we were working through these issues that were coming up in our structure, namely like just accountability and mutual support within the staff, because there was no hierarchy, right? There isn't somebody for you to respond to. There isn't somebody there to tell you what you need to do, right? You have to be really self-guided, and you need parameters for that to happen. And so Autumn recommended that we look at this worker self-directed nonprofit model, and we did, and we said, hey, this looks like it might work for us. Let's try it out. And that's what we did. We spent some time building it. So the worker self-directed nonprofit model is a traditional nonprofit and a collective, right? So it's like traditional nonprofit plus cooperative equals worker self-directed nonprofit. And it is a framework. It's not a model. It's not like, here, this is how everybody should do it. It's actually a framework, and you build your structure around the work of your own individual organization and how you do your own work. And so we had to do that. We had to think about what were the buckets and the circles of work within our organization and how we wanted to do that work. And so right now, everybody is a co-executive director. We're a staff of 4 people, and everybody manages their own circle. And so because I'm the director of Radical Philanthropy, I am charged with managing all of our fundraising. But I am not the only person in my circle. There are 2 other people in my circle, and we all work collaboratively. And so although my responsibility is to ensure that the work happens, I'm not doing the work alone. And so, you know, the conversation that Yolanda and I were having is that we have a generation of baby boomers who have been in leadership at these organizations for decades. And because of the hierarchical structure that we have, all of our work within our organization is siloed. And so nobody in the organization is actually prepared to take on all of that organizational knowledge and all of that work because nobody's been doing that work with the executive director. And so when you have a collaborative model or a more collaborative model, it means that everybody's doing the work together. So if I were to step outside and get hit by a truck, the people that resist would be fine because
Or win the lottery.
Or win the
Yeah.
Let's be a little less nihilistic. I don't know if I would stop working if I won the lottery. That's a good it's a good consideration. You know, if I for some reason needed to leave, or if I was turning 65 and retiring, the people in my organization would be able to continue the work because there was a culture of collaborative work. And that means that everybody that's a part of that circle, not just me, can take on the workload. And so I think what it solves for is this issue of transition and also onboarding people, right? So when you're doing your work alone, there isn't really anybody, like, how are you gonna replace 25 years of organizational knowledge? And so my directive when I think about nonprofits is to think beyond a hierarchical structure, right? What are like small things that you can do to make your work more collective, which means that everybody takes responsibility for it.
Yeah, one of the things that was in the TS&E report, but is always talked about relative to the movement, I think, that millennials are making in the nonprofit workforce is to no longer accept that life needs to end when you take on a nonprofit job, that all of you, literally all of you, has to go to this work, and burnout so high, and you hear about kind of boards looking for that heroic leader in the report that was put together. So I'm just curious, in your context, what does that burnout balance kind of feel like when you don't carry the whole load home every day? Or is it not that different? Is it still the same challenge because you're in the nonprofit sector and we haven't cracked that code? Okay, good, give us some hope.
It feels completely different.
All right.
I've been at Resist for 5 years, and I'm like, people should work at places like Resist forever. But we don't. I think, for one, I think that's one of the things that I wanted to point at is about the length of time that people stay in their positions and they sit in their seats. At Resist, we have a 7-year cap for that reason. Because one, things change in 7 years. We don't want our organization and our work to get stale. And two, nobody should be working at a place for, if you're not leaving, you're not opening space for somebody else to take over. And so we're very clear about this is the trajectory of a staff person at Resist. You start working here, and this is your trajectory for the 7 years that you're here, and then you transition out, and somebody else comes. And so that's one thing that I wanted to point out. We have when I first started working at Resist, that burnout very much did exist, right? It was because there was like this lack of structure. But we created a very robust mutual support and accountability structure within our organization. And so for us, the relational piece of our work is just as important as our grant making. And so we have monthly all staff retreats at Resist. We go to our office twice a week, 3 days out of the week we work remotely. On Friday, during the summers, we only have a 4-day work week. We have a ton of time that people get to take off. There are things that we do together as a staff.
Are you hiring? No.
We were. I know. We were. Yeah, and it's not only that, right? Like for example, feedback. We have 3 separate cycles of feedback. We have individual feedback, that is like my feedback, that isn't just feedback at my job. It's my professional feedback, it's personal feedback, it's spiritual feedback, right? It's like, hey, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Have you been doing your morning practice? Or we've noticed that you're on edge because you haven't been doing your morning practice, so maybe you should pick that back up again. And so it's beyond the work, it's also personal. And so we have individual feedback, we have our own organizational feedback, and so we give ourselves feedback about how we're living into our values organizationally. And because we have a culture of feedback, it kind of like alleviates that, oh, you have to hold people accountable when they do something wrong. And that's a whole other stress that like we don't have inside of the, that nonprofits bring on. And so implementing like those mutual support practices really made it so that we're not only more effective at our job, like we're kicking ass. Sorry, like Resist is just doing really well. Our budget is growing every year. We're giving away more money. The people who work there are super happy. I don't want to brag, but it was all our structure. It was all our structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think sometimes people think about dismantling structure, therefore that insinuates there's a lack of structure. And I love that what you're tying to is just a different kind of structure. And I think that's important to kind of think about and note, because in the move to dismantle structure, we could leave chaos and disorganization, and we've got to be really careful about that. So thank you for that. So Carolyn, you lead really an identity-based organization. You're the only one here who represents kind of one community that specifically. And I'm wondering if you could just talk about the advantages to that, kind of what you take from it in terms of your joy around the work, but then where's the struggle?
So I think, the Asian American Resource Workshop we organize Asian American folks and mostly young adults, and all of our staff are Asian American identified, and we're all under 30. So, we all, or I guess one of us just turned 30, but and they might be watching, but we're within, right? We're all members of our organization as well, and we identify that way. And I think, the joy is that my life, my work, my politics, it gets to come together, right? And it feels really hard a lot of the time, and it doesn't feel like a job all of the time because it feels like my life work in a lot of ways. But then the challenge is, where are the boundaries of that, and how do I sort through, kind of what is the work that I need to be moving and what is other pieces that I'm doing more as a member, volunteer, because obviously as a salaried executive director, you're working all the time. So, what are those lines in general, but particularly when you are a member of your organization, right? But I think, we are identity-based, but we know within that there's so much expansiveness to Asian American identity. And so for me, as a Chinese American person, a mixed race person, who is supporting a lot of work in the Southeast Asian, so particularly the Vietnamese community, and we're growing some South Asian organizing work this year. I do think of it both around me as a member of the organization and how am I standing in solidarity with other parts of the Asian community that are often left out of the conversation, right? There's a whole model minority myth kind of conversation within the Asian community, and how are we supporting working class folks, folks from different ethnic immigration backgrounds, within in the conversation. So it is about identity, and it's also about how do we build that nuance around identity and not just say, oh, we're all this, so we all have the same experience, right? But we all bring different experiences, and we need to, think about how we build power and solidarity together, and then also how do we not just create monolithic kind of definitions. But yeah, and that we're identity-based and we're also issue-based. So we work with other communities of color, other communities that are impacted by the issues that our communities care about. And that's, such a joy to the work, to be able to be part of a Asian American social justice community and be part of a broader community in my neighborhood, in my city, that are building toward a more just, equitable city. But yeah, I think the challenge is probably, and I think the rest of the staff would say this, as folks who are members of our organization, sometimes we just don't know where the line is. Where does the day end? Where does it not? And that just, it can be exhausting. So I think being disciplined about knowing that and knowing what your work plan is, and then what are you also might be interested in doing something outside of your work plan, right? So I go to events other staff people are running, not as the executive director. Of course, everyone knows I'm the executive director, but also because, I'm a member and I want to learn more. I want to be part of that space. And I hope that means I can continue to contribute in different ways beyond my time as the executive director. And I'm excited for the days I'm just a member of the organization.
Excellent. So how many folks in this room are on a board or manage a board? I'm just curious. Show of hands. Awesome. And almost all of you are obviously managing a board, on a board? On a board, okay. So there's obviously a racial diversity problem on boards, right? Well-known thing. In the report, I believe the stat was 84% of nonprofit board members are white. Most of them are older, right? Over 50 or so. So two things I'm wondering, so you can answer either one, and if we don't tackle one of them, I'll bring us back. One is your experience that being the only one in the boardroom? And if so, how do you navigate that dynamic? The other question is, so how do we move this forward and get more young people and more people of color on these boards? Anyone can go.
So I think for our organization, similar to the staff, all of our board members are members. Everyone's under 40, I think, and everyone's Asian identified, and we, really value diversity within the Asian umbrella on the board. So it is a different and unique experience to manage the board. For most of them, it's their first board too. So it's almost like I'm young and trying to figure it out, and we're trying to, coach folks to be board members as well. And so I almost feel like I have the opposite challenge of trying to both grow my own skills and support the board members in their development so that they can continue to be part of other organizations and be resources beyond our own organization. But on both the boards I'm on, I think I'm the youngest person. And so, that is definitely, it's a dynamic, and they're all run by women. And I think, even when I started, my board is amazing, but, folks were like, do you know the finances? Do you know how to do that? That's a real thing and the answer was kind of no, but probably as much as anyone, right? I don't know. You figure it out, right? So I think that you do see those things play out all the time, and being, the young idealistic board member, and how do you kind of push back against some of that. I think we have to be. I was lucky I'm now on the board, but at the Phillips Brooks House Association, the board is half college students, and so I was lucky as a college student to be part of that board, and that is a space where college students are we were like trained in nonprofit board skill sets, and I think that, you know, it's been huge for all of us in our growth, and just like those ways that we can create more developmental space for board members and have organizations that will take risks on board members and open the space for folks to ask questions, I think is really critical. And to really create board culture, because I think it's easier on the staff side, but where we can check each other on things like, you know, the microaggressions, the bigger things than microaggressions that happen all the time in those spaces. And I think it's definitely more challenging to create that kind of board culture than it is necessarily on the staff.
Yeah, I would like to answer the question about how to get more people of color and younger folks
Great,
involved with boards, because Resist had to transition from a majority white baby boomer board to a 99% POC board in the last few years. And so there were some lessons that we learned about that. And so the first one for us was the level of responsibility that the board takes on, right? And so there's always this question about skills. Does this young person know how to do finance, right? And so one of the things that the worker self-directed nonprofit model opened up for us is that the model calls for the board to actually delegate the responsibility of leading the organization to the staff collective. And so our board doesn't actually have decision-making power for the direction and the vision of the organization, which means that we don't need somebody to be an expert on how to do finances because we have a finance person. We do have an expert of somebody who knows how to do finances, and she's amazing, and she was the only person that remains on our board since our transition because she really supported our vision, but it really opened that up because now, and because we are a grassroots foundation, our board doesn't have to be a fundraising board. You don't have to have connections. You don't have to know a bunch of people. You don't have to be an expert at specific things because all of that work lies within the staff collective. And so that was our first lesson. Our second lesson was the length and the timing of board meetings was like not working. We're having full day board meetings 6 times a year. And we
Everyone wanted to join your board.
Elena
Yeah,
shocked.
nobody wanted to join our board. Not only that, in that moment, the board was making decisions about where the grants were going. So we were meeting for an entire day, 6 times a year to read grant applications and make decisions about grants. And so when we transitioned to the worker self-directed nonprofit model, that decision-making power was delegated to the grant-making panel. So now the board also doesn't have to do that. So now we can go down to having 4 virtual meetings a year and 1 retreat at the beginning of the year together, right? And so when you release the workload, then it becomes more accessible to people who are younger, working full-time jobs, might have not been on a board before. Then all of a sudden, being on this board becomes accessible. And now we have all of these rad people on our board who are just brilliant and who are supporting us in leading this organization.
And I think one really specific thing that you said that's important to me is that the board does not have to be the only fundraising space. Even with our board, people are always like, oh, should we get folks, who have fundraising networks, it's you can build other spaces for that. You can engage folks in that work. It doesn't have to be all on the staff, but what is the real role of your board and how do we create more space for different kinds of skill sets instead of assuming they all have to be on the board?
And for us, our board is support and oversight, right? Send us the finances, is everything right? They're supporting us. What do you want to do? How can we help you to figure this out? They're not making decisions about what we're doing, which changes the dynamic and the relationship between the board.
Totally. Thank you. Elijah, yeah, go ahead, and then we'll open up.
Testing. You guys can hear me?
No.
No, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, right. All right. So at Bikes on Bombs, we have a pretty traditional board. in that there are clear decision-making responsibilities that they retain, and there are clear ones where they're delegated. And I think I found it invaluable to be on the board, having that perspective, really learning what does it mean to support an executive director, so that now that I'm in the role, I can really understand what to look for to give new board members direction in terms of what ways they can support our work. It makes me wonder if that traditional structure, because we are predominantly white and male on our board, how much it serves as a barrier to diversifying and actually getting some of our constituents on the board. I think that's definitely something that we should really look at. I think what's worked well for us is just really establishing clear roles and responsibilities, clear strategies for communicating with one another, because without that solid foundation of clarity, you can really get into tough situations where either as executive director, I'm going beyond my role, and the board is obviously not going to respond well to that, or I feel like the board is maybe a little bit too involved and should take a step back and really reflect on what its role should be. So I think clarity helps, communication helps. So Elaine's special assistant actually happens to be my board chair, and so that has a lot of benefits, including being able to just leverage all the resources that he has access to here at TSNE MissionWorks. Whenever there are trainings that come up, he's telling me, sign up for that, make sure your staff members are getting involved in that, and I think that has definitely been hugely helpful for us. We meet twice a month, we talk about everything, and it's become a real partnership, and I think that's really important to have in a board, because ultimately, at least in the traditional sense, they're responsible for executing our mission. So that's kind of how it works at Bikes Not Bombs.
Thank you. One thing I would mention is you shouldn't wait to ask to get engaged in an organization you care about either, right? So a lot of times we wait for people to ask us to join a board. And so, of course, everybody who's sitting on $100 million is getting asked to join a board. But that doesn't mean that organizations aren't looking for you. Make yourself seen. And so a lot of folks in my network have been able to get on boards through friends, or literally by volunteering at an organization and dropping lines to staff and saying, hey, I'd really love to get more involved. What does it take to get on a board here? And when you start to make yourself known, people start to see the possibility of you on a board too. And we've just got to get better at advocating for ourselves, and also, helping other people create some openings in those seats. And leverage your network to do that too. So we'll talk about mentorship as we close, but I actually want to bring it now to you. So what are your questions? Who's got a question? All right, we've got one over here. If you could introduce yourself and then ask your question, that would be great. And tell us if you're affiliated with an organization too. There'll be a mic coming to you, I think. A mic that works. Right over there in the blue shirt behind the pole. Yep.
Hello, everyone. So we represent a 501 organization called Farm8, and we're dedicating to establishing affordable and accessible drug therapeutics to deal with the generic drug shortage.
Can I ask you to stand and speak up a little? Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
So my question for you guys is, are all of you 501 organizations, and if so, how do you maintain your tax-exempt status? And how do you not get in trouble with the IRS? We're going through the process right now, so this is something that's important to us.
Huh. Good question. Any thoughts on that?
I feel like I'm the one that's closest to maybe messing. I feel like I'm the one that's pushing the envelope the most. We pay very close attention. Our philosophy at Resist is that the nonprofit industrial complex is a system of control for our movements. Maybe that's dramatic to say here, but
There were snaps.
Yeah, no, I was like,
Yeah.
So like our philosophy is that the nonprofit industrial complex is a system of control, and our job is, as a foundation specifically, is to take the brunt so that the people who we fund don't have to. And so our lawyer, who is also super rad, helps us push the envelope just enough to subvert the control that the nonprofit industrial complex is trying to, take, but also still stay within the parameters of the law and not break the law. And so that's really, it's a risk that we take, but taking a risk is a part of our history, so we keep doing it.
Yeah. Great. Anyone want to add? No? So I can add to that. I kind of picked up INP. We were part of the organization and then became independent under my leadership. So we started kind of as a startup, like you might be now, and have grown since. I worked on really getting some other nonprofit leaders to advise me by sharing things like, what's your finance manual? What procedures do you use so that I don't do something illegal? And just starting with the very basics. Now we subcontract out to pretty reasonable for us, kind of CFO who manages our audit and takes a lot of that heat off of us. And so they don't have to be full-time, either. But I also don't have to be a finance expert. And that was really important to figure out how to create that sustainability. Every nonprofit leader will have gone through this, right? And so I would just tap some people. I've rarely encountered somebody who I've asked for help who said, no, I don't have time for you, especially if you're talking about finance and you're like, no, this is serious, I need your help. And if you ever wanted to talk to somebody on my team, I'd be happy to connect you.
I'll just add,
Yeah.
the nonprofit finance fund is an invaluable
Yeah.
resource.
Yeah. A hand somewhere over here, I believe, behind this pole. All right. I know this person. Hold on, Mike's coming your way. Thank you. Yes. The captioning, yes. Okay.
Hi, my name is Trina Jackson, and I'm with TS&E Mission Works and an admirer of all of these people on the panel. So my question is, one of the things that we've been learning about having people of color in leadership of nonprofits is that the way that people of color lead has not always been a value within the nonprofit structure. And so I'm wondering how you have created space for you to lead the way that resonates with you and where you come from and the communities that have raised you. In other words, how have you been able to lead in a way that resonates from your values, from your communities, and how have you carved out a space to do that, and how have you been able to negotiate and push back on expectations of leadership that are really shaped by a nonprofit structure that has been white-led? Thank you.
I'll try to take a crack at that question. So when I was undergrad, I took a leadership class because I was really shy and I really wanted to break out of that mold. And at the end of that class, I learned that leaders come in all shape and sizes. Yes, it's cliche, but I really took away that leaders come in all shape and sizes. And even though I'm mostly quiet and reserved and I possibly don't come off as being a leader as people say a leader is supposed to be, again, that I can be a leader with the personality that I have, which is somewhat goofy and immature and childlike. I learned that I can be quiet. I learned that I can be serious at times. And so throughout my journey, I'm taking that with me. The second part of your question is taking that and leading that into the communities that you serve. Because I am who I am, a lot of people take to me. I don't act like, oh, I don't come in a room and say, I'm the executive director of such and such. I just say, I'm Chevelle, I'm a Mattapan resident. And people come and ask me questions, and I just ask it. I just answer it. I don't come off as I'm above them or under them. they're the community that I'm serving, and so I am just like them. I live in Mattapan or Dorchester or Roxbury. I'm just like them, and a title doesn't mean anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, Trina, I really appreciate the question. I think that, you know, it's a real struggle, right, to figure out those balances. And I think, particularly, I think even just having an executive director title, right? I value the collective, I value community, I value partnership, and there's a way in which the title itself creates this dynamic where you're supposed to have the answer and you're supposed to present yourself a certain way and you're supposed to always be on and all of this stuff. And so how do we, as we all think about what structures can push back and work for our organizations, because, you know, I think I'm really inspired by what Resist has done, and I think that, you know, we all have to figure out what structures we can move. But, you know, even within a more traditional structure, how do I name that I try to name when I've made mistakes or messed up or feel that I need to, you know, be accountable around something that's happened. You know, I think trying to create a dynamic where it feels more collective, not just within the staff, but with our member leaders, with the folks who are leading our work, right, day to day. You know, to me, I was thinking about this as I was trying to prep for this panel. Like, how can I see being the executive director more as, you know, walking along other people, walking alongside people to make change, and not just, you know, standing in front of the room or presenting the budget, right? But really that my role, and I think this comes from a value place, is around walking alongside people and walking with them on that journey to make change in our community. And how do you both, like, do the things that need to happen because you have an organization that you need to keep legally, fiscally sound, and, like, know where your energy is and where your values are. And one thing Suzanne Lee, who's a longtime community organizer in Chinatown, said to me, she said, every conversation you have, that's what's actually important, right? I get in my head, I'm like, oh, I have all these emails to respond to, right? But every time you sit down with someone, that's the real work. And how do I value all those different things I'm doing in the day and not just like, oh, I have to get this done. Of course, we have those days, but you know, how do I really say that's the work? And that's being an executive director is just, you know, being blessed to be part of that work. It's not, these other things are just the grind that I'll do, you know.
Do you mind?
Yeah. No, but I just want to kind of push on this point a little bit and see if, Kendra, maybe you could take this on. But what happens when that's not accepted? You are not accepted in the boardroom. Your style, your approach to leadership is called into question. How do you rise and face that? I don't know, Trina, if you're kind of, you know, maybe going to that, right? But like, how do you deal with it, overcome it, push it forward, make sure that it doesn't take you, the collective us, over?
Yeah, thank you for that reframe. I mean, I wanted to speak about this in particular because I am very prone to being the charismatic leader. Like, I am that person. All of the ways that, like, white supremacy tells you need to behave to be successful, I very squarely am good at those things. And they have been part of the reason why I've been able to be so successful. And so for me, you know, as a person of color, it's like you come in and you're like, oh, you know, what happens if your leadership style is different? And it's like, oh no, what happens if your leadership time is exactly the same? And you're a black woman and you're like, oh, actually, I'm a type A and I'm trying to do, right? And so a lot of the work that I needed to do, stepping into positions of leadership, was to figure out how to make space. And it wasn't about values, because I came from a grantee organization and, you know, I'm a girl from the hood. And so all of those things, I was always myself, but in the way that I did my work, like the way that I did my work, I had to figure out like, oh, I had to come to terms with the fact that I am successful because I do things this way, and that I am accepted in a lot of places because I'm palatable in those ways. And so that's kind of, I was like, you know, there's the other side of that coin, is that some of us are really good at switching it, you know, like code switching and going in and managing it. And so, you know, to model a little vulnerability, that is something that I had to struggle with, to learn from. But, you know, still at Resist, I came up against that wall of being young and being Black and people not really wanting to take leadership from me and not agreeing with the direction that I was trying to move the organization in. And so the way that I came across that's what was through community. It was because the other people that I worked with were a support system for me, right? They were the naysayers, and then there were people that were, you know, they kind of wrapped themselves around me and said, we can do this, we can fight this, the way that you're doing it is valuable and is gonna make us and put us in a separate direction. And so, you know, I work at a really small organization, and some of us work at bigger organizations, and so like, find your people. Who are your people who are gonna support you and champion you and push you forward? Because at the end of the day, doing the work in a value-aligned way actually helps you meet your mission. And so it's actually in the benefit of the organization to move things in that direction. And sometimes it takes a really long time, and sometimes it takes hell and high water, which was my experience. But it happens when your people have your back and people are championing you. You know, that's all I got.
Thank you. Elijah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I've definitely, a lot of things are coming up for me in this conversation. I think what comes to mind is just some of the challenges that I've had working with a predominantly white board, and the perceptions that of me that it comes with because they've never had, or if not in a long time, had an ED of color that came from the programs. And I think in a lot of ways, I own this. I unapologetically really advocate for the needs of our constituents, and I feel like that's my job. I think because I'm a participant in a lot of ways, I own that responsibility. But it has been met with, at times, challenging interactions, microaggressions, things that I think I probably should have been prepared for, but wasn't. And I think what helped me in the moment was having people that I could rely on, who I could talk through it with. Am I perceiving this way? Am I being overly sensitive? If not, what do I do about it? And they really came through for me. Lisa Owens from my INP experience, she was my coach. Now as the ED at City Life, she's in the same complex as me at Bikes Not Bombs, and I can literally just run up the stairs, go to her office, and talk to her about whatever's going on. And that has been incredible for me, because there aren't that many other leaders of color in JP, and I think it's important that we stick together and really help to navigate these issues. I think you have to call out microaggressions, race-based bigotry, whatever it is, small, big, overt, or not. And when you do, really stand your ground, right? Hold firm and know that you're speaking truth to power, and whoever you're speaking to probably needs to hear what you're about to say. So I think that's the advice I would give. It's definitely helped me really navigate those challenging issues, and it's made, I think, interacting and engaging with and working with the board even better, having overcome some of these challenging issues.
Thank you. Yes, scanning the room. All right, I'll come back that way. Let's go to the middle of the room here, then to the left, then to the right. Remember to say your name too.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Berlinda Mojica. I'm a search consultant with Isaacson Miller. And my question has to do with one of the struggles that a lot of us millennials are facing is student loan debt. And entering the nonprofit sector isn't as attractive as entering the private sector. And I was wondering what advice you all had for millennials who have this social justice driven values in them and want to pursue these careers, but find it really hard to make it viable given the offers that come from the private sector versus nonprofit.
Good question. Everybody hear that? No. Okay. I think I'm noticing just it's hard to hear across the room. So the question is, let's talk about student debt for millennials and a lot of offers coming from the private sector versus the nonprofit sector. You want to do nonprofit work, but essentially, how do you navigate that? How do you make that decision as you're balancing those two? So go ahead, and I'll come to you. Yep.
Go to the private sector.
Okay, there's that. Tell us more.
Yeah, well,
yes.
I mean, this is one of the things that nonprofits call for people to do is to be like martyrs for the cause. If you're in $100,000, like they want you to come here because this is what it does. What like nonprofit work and social justice work does. It plays at your basic instincts to want to serve, to offer you crumbs. Nonprofit organizations need to pay their workers a living wage. One. And you don't have to martyr yourself and struggle and not eat and like not pay your rent because you want to do good work. The work that you get paid for does not have to be your heart work. You can go somewhere and get paid and do the work that you're passionate about on a volunteer basis. You can join a group. You can do organizing work. And so don't, because this is one of the things that like that nonprofit work does, is that it calls on us to be like, come and do good work that's gonna save the world. Right? Like get paid $30,000 and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner. And that's our work to do. Like these nonprofit organizations, like we have to figure that out. You can't, put your people through struggle because you're trying to like help other people not struggle, right? Like people need healthcare. They need to be paid. And so, if you can't afford to go work at a nonprofit, then go to the private sector. Work there, pay off your student loans, and then do something else, right? Like, do not martyr yourself because you think that that's what you're supposed to do to serve your people. You can do that on your free time.
What do other folks think?
I think you did a good job at answering that. I would say that I also just been in the nonprofit sector since I graduated. I was in AmeriCorps service, did that for 3 years, and then I volunteered at that service. And then I had my first full-time job at a local neighborhood health center, and that also was a nonprofit as well. But I still loved doing my Mattapan food and fitness stuff. And so I always had a job, and then I did my Mattapan food and fitness stuff because, like you said, that was really calling me. Like, if I could work there, I would work there, and now I'm happy that I do. Do I get paid a lot of money for it? Probably not. I'm still probably gonna volunteer in my time doing this, but again, if you should definitely listen to what Kendra said. Again, I always had a full-time job, and I did my volunteer service on the side.
There was a comment in the back of the room, Elaine, if you could, thank you. It's related to this, I'm assuming.
Well, I feel as though that...
Can you say your name and, yeah, sorry, just back you up.
My name is Marissa, and I'm an administrative assistant for an architectural firm in Boston. And this is, as a millennial, this is my second career. I appreciate that you brought up that comment about student loans. It's a huge, huge discussion, I would say. But I wonder what the pool is, though. What is the pool? Is it everybody? Or is it just a single, is it certain people? Like, what is it? But one common thread that I agree with is that it is kind of tough. But I agree with you at the end in the really pretty white dress. You shouldn't have to sacrifice, and that shouldn't be an option at all. But as a curiosity, what is the pool in regards to, I would say, ethnicity? We'll just say that. Is it everybody? Is it singular? What is it?
When you say what is the pool, what do you mean exactly? The pool of
ethnicity. Just all of us. Like, what is the pool? Is it everybody? I mean, I feel like student loans are just crazy
Who is
being in the debt.
who are student loans affecting? You're saying generally?
Is it just the millennials, which is
Yeah.
did we?
Oh no.
No, it's everything, right?
Right.
I think as a millennial, and I'm in the, let's see, I'm 32, which I assume is the middle. I'm the middle, right? So has it affected is it just that? It's not Gen Z yet. Is it the generation before us? Like, where's that? But again, student loans, it's a huge, huge topic, and it just by everyone's reaction, it's a big one too.
Yeah, if you think about it a little more broadly, so it affects millennials, Gen Xers, right? It goes up the chain. When you're a parent, it affects you too. So, can you work for $30,000 a year and have 2 kids and send them to college? Probably not. And so I would say it's a cross-cutting issue, and so I probably wouldn't put it in a category. Maybe right. Of course, there's disproportionality in there, right? Like, so who can afford to cut their student loans down? Who knows how to navigate the financial aid process? There's so much nuance there, but I appreciate you kind of bringing up that point. So other thoughts, I'm just curious on this idea of, so can you work in the nonprofit sector and get paid? This is real talk right now. All right, I got lots of hands, so great. Elaine's back there. We're gonna come up front. Okay.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Joyce, and I'm from Commonwealth Corporation. I love that this, I know Elijah. You don't know me, but I know you. I love that this question came up because in my work, I work for the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund, and literally the thing that I get most excited about in my job is making sure that state funding is going to organizations that are providing training across our major sectors, manufacturing, construction, healthcare, that these folks are receiving training to get access to sustainable wages. So I just love that. But all of that to say, I spend a lot of my time reviewing grants. Please, 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 do not believe someone who says they cannot pay you what you deserve to be paid. I just have to say that. I had to stand up and say that because I review these grants and I see amazing training organizations who are providing this training and they're paying their workers what they deserve. And that's why their staff doesn't have high turnover rates, right? Because we all see it. Yolanda mentioned the burnout. It happens. We know that it's real. But please do not believe someone that tells you that you do not deserve to be paid, which you know, with your education, with your lived experience, right? Because maybe we don't all have 4-year degrees or 2-year degrees, but we have lived experience. We've been in the workforce. Please know what that's worth and don't accept an offer. Also, don't forget to negotiate that offer that you deserve.
I think we have our future panelist.
Can I add commentary to that?
Yes.
So this is a shameless plug for TSNE. Go to our website. We have free resources on our website. One of those free resources is a report called Wage Equity Matters. So TSNE has, for the past decade, been doing annual reports on wages in the nonprofit sector by region, by field within the nonprofit sector, by positions, by gender, by age, and by race. So go to that report and you can peg if you're getting a job offer, whether or not it's an equitable offer. Because you can see across organizations what people are offering for different positions. Yeah, and cross budget sizes. So.
Yeah, and then if you really want to get personal, you can go to every organization's $9.90 on GuideStar.com.
Top 5 salaries.
And you'll see what the top 5 people make on their tax returns. And they're all $100,000 over salaries, right? Because that's what they have to report. So you'll see where those jobs are. And that's the path to rise. That's why we're here. How do we rise into these positions as well and gain the experience, and not to undercut the idea that you shouldn't go get a job where you can get paid.
Yeah.
Both things are true. So you have to decide for you. But I saw a whole row of people, so I'm going to come right here, and then I'm going to go this way. Okay.
Hey guys, my name's Elise Lash. I work as a youth program social worker at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And I really appreciate your response in regards to just advocating for our worth. I got into the field of social work because I care about people a lot, and I started by studying social work as a bachelor's level social worker and realized that there's a really easy, steep ceiling that you hit pretty quickly with a bachelor's in social work. So I came to Boston and pursued my master's in social work at Boston College because I realized that in that field, there's a limit on how much money you can earn with only a bachelor's degree. And from my personal experience, I feel really passionate about financial literacy, and I'm really fortunate that when I was in college, I was able to take a finance class, and for me, that really shaped my view about organizing money, feeling like I'm in control of my money rather than my money controlling me. And I'm really proud to say that I'm 3 months away from being debt-free with two degrees as a social worker. And I say that just because I think that in our generation, we get so caught up into that. And I remember after I graduated, everyone talked about, loan forgiveness, public service forgiveness, and just putting off your loans and paying the minimum and waiting forever to do that. And I just didn't believe that early on, and I think that I'm really fortunate to have had mentors that told me that's not the only option. And I also really believe strongly in advocating for our worth and negotiating for raises, especially as a woman of color. I feel really, really strongly about that. I preach that really strongly. I've attended salary negotiation workshops, which if no one has done that, I really encourage people to do that because we need to speak our confidence, we need to speak about our experience and not be sold short and expect to do work out of the goodness of your heart because that does not pay the bills. So I feel really strongly about that, but I think I just wanted to share my piece about take a financial class, go to a salary negotiation class. It goes a long way. It really boosted my confidence. So,
thank you. All right, couple more comments on this, and then I'm going to move us on to the next question, right here in this middle row. Okay. We have a spokesperson for row 2 right now. Okay.
So hello everyone, my name is Lorena Lopera, and I work with Latinos for Education. I really appreciate your question, and I do agree that we should not martyr ourselves. I do, however, believe that if you fully are passionate and desire to be in this work, you can be in this work and actually make a living wage. I am a mother of 2. I am a homeowner. I'm a millennial. And I'm not saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but what I am saying is advocate for yourselves because it is absolutely necessary, especially as people of color, especially as women of color. What I will also say is, when I graduated from college, nobody told me to look at being a teacher, all right? And so I'm not saying it's easy work, because it's not. But what I can say is here in Boston and here in Massachusetts, you can make a pretty decent wage working directly with our students and our families that need us and need people of color and don't need more white people in their classrooms. So you can make a living, good, decent wage being a teacher of color here in our system. I am fortunate to have people like my friend Mindy here who has supported me professionally because we can talk about our salaries. Let's not keep it a secret, people. What you make, you should be able to have conversations with your people and say, you deserve more. You need to advocate for yourself. So that's all I have to say unless I miss something.
All right, one more comment up front? Nope, good? Sure? All right. So let me take a couple questions. I'm going to bring it back to you all on building your network in a sec. Go ahead. Yep. Or don't go just yet till a microphone has arrived.
Hi, I'm Shreya. I work with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I actually have a really quick response to that, but then also have a question. One of the things actually that the UCS did last year was bring in an external auditor to look at any disparities across gender and sexual orientation and race around pay. And a few of us ended up getting market bumps, and so that's something that if you can plant the seeds to your leadership, this is actually something now the organization is going to start doing every 2 years to just make sure that everyone is getting paid appropriately for their experience and their lived experiences, and there's no discrepancy among any of the identities. And so there are resources and consultants, especially if your organization has the capacity to do that, would recommend looking into that. Okay, so my question. This kind of happens in nonprofits, I think, especially in places where people really feel connected to the mission and vision of it, where you think about the workplace as a family. However, it's not a family. It's still a workplace. There's still boundaries. And so as leaders, especially leaders of color, how do you balance creating a community at work where people can bring in their full authentic self, but also not taking advantage of those like familial type feelings and actually establishing appropriate boundaries?
Okay, so building community at work while not taking advantage of familial type feelings and establishing appropriate boundaries. Work wants to be a family is not a family. Did I get that? Okay, you all heard that? Okay, good. So who's taking that one? Great.
The people at my job are my family. No, kidding. I mean, we have created a culture at my office where it's like that. And the way that we circumvent it is by having very clear policies and practices and by sticking to them, right? Like, no, it doesn't matter that we are very close, but because this is what our policy says, and this is, like, if you have a process outlined for everything, this is the streamlined process about how we make decisions about raises. This is the streamlined process about how we make decisions about this. You have to have clear decision-making processes because your policies and practices ultimately will circumvent those relationships because that's just what they are. And so if you are in a situation where you feel like those familial ties are kind of playing into that, look into what the policy says and reference that because it makes it less personal. It removes it. Because you can get into those things. One of my coworkers is also the person who's been my mentor since I was 13, and my other coworker is somebody who I've known since I was in high school. And so, and this all happened by happenstance. We just ended up working in the same place together, but we've been in situations where it's been like, oh, but you're supposed to be like my people, and you did X, Y, and Z. And then it was like, oh, because we don't have a clear process by which to do this that applies to everybody. And so then we created it. And now you kind of remove those things. And so practices and policies are really important, and decision-making processes are really important when you're trying to build like a familial culture at work.
I would add, in addition to that, make sure that there's a culture and there's a space where people can raise issues in a way that maybe is aligned with their values, but still leads to a positive work atmosphere. Because ultimately, that's the point of kind of establishing more familial relationships, is so that you can do the work better. And so, if it becomes an obstacle, I think you definitely want to make sure there are processes in place that make people feel comfortable enough to raise those issues without maybe undermining the relationships that they hold dear.
Yeah, I mean, I think those 2 points really resonate with me. I think the only other thing is, naming. I think especially within some of the hierarchical relationships, it can be challenging. So just like naming, how we're showing up, right? Because sometimes, on a weekend we are talking about work, or I'm going to your birthday party, right? But being willing to just name kind of what the boundaries are, right? And if they don't, and opening space, especially as someone who has power within the hierarchy, for other folks to name, if they need different boundaries. And I think, because it is true, we do, it's not a bad thing to have those close relationships, but how do you create the structures, and then where the structures may not exist because, you're still evolving them within the organization, at least, provide the room to really name the boundaries and name how you're showing up together. And to sometimes name, we're not, this is outside. This is not a work thing, or we're gonna spend 15 minutes to talk about this work thing, and then like that's not what we're doing today. And of course those things feel a little forced, but otherwise it gets so blurry. I think, you know, it can lead, as I think Kendra's saying, it can lead to like, you know, hard feelings and complicated dynamics.
And I would just like to say that that's exactly how, in my perspective, how MFFC is. They're like my family, and I love them so much. And I go to their house to parties, and they take me everywhere, and they go to my graduation, and like we're just so close. So I'm learning a lot. Thank you for asking that question. I'm really learning a lot about how can I create those boundaries now that I'm actually working there and not volunteering there.
Great.
The only thing and that we don't need to compromise our personal relationships to do that, right? That it's still so important that we get to go get a drink with our friend or be part of each other's lives in the ways Chevelle was saying, but that, you know, you have to also figure out.
I'll just add, so one of the things that I took away from being a Teach for America core member was how to have difficult conversations. There's a whole framework, kind of protocol that they train us in, but ultimately the point of it is to raise issues that may be uncomfortable or maybe challenging the dynamic that ideally you want to create, but it's important that you raise this issue. And I think being prepared to have those difficult conversations, especially as executive directors, I think is just having that mindset will help ease the problem-solving part of the process.
I'm going to bring it back to the audience, but two themes have been coming up. So one is mentorship. You've got mentors. And social capital, just generally building those connections. So I'm wondering if any of you could talk a little bit more for folks who are like, yeah, well, I don't have a mentor. How do I go find a mentor? That's a mystery. Or how do I actually leverage a network and get a meaningful network? What do you advise people to do?
I have this book of business cards that I just collect every time I meet someone. I put it in there, and it becomes kind of like an encyclopedia that I can reference every time I want to look up an organization or connect with someone or introduce someone to someone else. Often that's what I'm asking people to do, and so sometimes people ask me to do that. Definitely do that, by the way. If you, like on LinkedIn or any kind of social media, you know that you have mutual connections with someone, ask them to introduce you. Often that helps kind of ease the conversation that you want to have with that connection, and I think there's value in the relationships that you already have. So yeah, I would start with that.
If you are a kind of reserved or shy person like myself and you don't feel comfortable maybe calling somebody, cold calling them on the phone or meeting them in person, like Elijah said, having them introducing what you said. I can't say it properly. Or what I like to do is if there's an event going on with one of our partners, I ask one of my board members to come with me. They are very talkative and they're very engaging, and I can come off a little shy. And so they introduce me to the people that they're talking to, and then I just come into the conversation, and then I start making my own connections there.
Nice. Any other advice? All right. Other questions? I saw their hand. Here's a hand. Right back here. Yep.
I just want to start off by saying I really appreciate the solidarity and support I feel in this space. Don't really get that at work, so this is really awesome event to get a chance to come to. I think one of the things that drew me to coming to this event was that we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that we experience in the nonprofit sector, and I think in the description it talked about we talked about like turnover and how leaders are often expected to sort of rise to the occasion without much support or, like not really having the experience or being at an organization that's under-resourced. And that's something that I'm sort of experiencing now at my organization. And it's especially hard to be led by a supervisor who is in their first year in the role and doesn't have a lot of experience. And I'm a recent college graduate. I graduated a year ago. This is my first job. And I expected to have more mentorship. I expected to have more experience at a nonprofit. And I'm often, whenever I feel like I've voiced my concerns or my ideas, I think I'm often sort of like, not dismissed, but like people think, oh, you're young, you're inexperienced, you don't know what you're saying, but I do know what to point out, and like I do know what I should be experiencing at a job, and I don't know. I feel like what I feel like doing now is leaving because I don't feel like I'm valued there, but I'm just wondering if you guys on the panel had any experiences feeling like you were led by people who are inexperienced or not being able to support you in the ways that you wanted to in terms of your personal and professional growth.
And maybe you can add to that, so how did you navigate it? Has anybody had that experience?
Yeah, my first salary job, working at a nonprofit, and I thought, I came from AmeriCorps, which was serving at a nonprofit, so I was like, yay, another nonprofit, but this time a bigger one with a $9 million salary, and I can be an executive assistant. Now I can learn about board governance and all of that. During my time, I had 3 CEOs when I was working there. The last CEO that was there, basically what I'm trying to say is that when I see that somebody who is in a leadership position, there are certain things that I think that person should be doing or how they're supposed to be leading. And some of the things I did not agree with what that how that CEO was moving, and it made me not want to put in my all into that organization anymore. Although I did have conversations with staff there, and I still came in happy and things like that. My soul was not. I was like, no, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, I just wasn't feeling it, and that's why I left. When Mattapan Food and Fitness said they were going to get an ED, I left because I just wasn't feeling safe there. I felt like that when opinions were asked of me, the opinion was asked, and then nothing was done with it. So I'm a type of person, I don't like to talk as much. Even though I'm talking now, I don't like to talk as much. And if I feel that you're asking me something and then I'm just wasting my breath, I don't like doing that because it takes a lot for me to give my opinion anyway. How I navigated that, I continued the relationships that I have with the staff people. I didn't really, even though I was executive assistant and I was working closely with the administration, I kind of left my office a lot, and I spent a lot of time with the staff people, the customer service, finance people, because that's where I found joy, working with the support staff. So that's what I did. But again, I ended up leaving that organization because of that.
So if your mentor is not at work, where do you go? And if anyone out here has an answer too, feel free to raise your hand.
To my other mentor?
Yeah, so Kendra, the mentor, rich panelist over here.
No, I mean,
at 14 years old, how did it begin for you? No, but what do you think? So where do you find a mentor if it's not at work? Anybody have an idea about that? Yeah, go ahead. And don't forget to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alejandro. I was definitely in a similar position at my previous job, and I'm also a alum of the IMP group. And that program really helped me understand my situation. And I was in a position where I felt like if I were to leave the organization, I would be abandoning the organization. And yet, if I stayed, I'd be kind of lying to myself. I wasn't putting myself, and I wasn't self-advocating, basically. And so I definitely found support within the organization through other people that I valued for their leadership. The IMP group also allowed me to access other mentors. So again, it goes back to a little bit what the panel has been discussing, and just looking at your network that you've been developing and really find people that you can rely on. And it sounds like you need to transition, and what is that process? And so not just jumping into that, but planning for your legacy there, because what you've done thus far, you've done things. And so making sure that you're leaving a legacy, and then finding a place that actually is supportive and where you receive what you should be receiving.
Thank you. Another person over here. Thank you.
I'm Dominique. I also was in that position a while ago, and the thing that helped me was making sure I built out my network besides having a mentor. Like, mentors are very important, but I think you also should build out the people who are your age and your peers and doing the same things that you're doing, and making sure that you have those conversations with them. Hey, I'm struggling with this. How are you navigating it at your workplace? And building out that support, because a mentor is going to give you all the advice that they went through back then, but there are people who are living it right now as you're doing it, and they're going to have pertinent advice to right now. So that's my advice. So
thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Erica. I am a director of annual giving at Gann Academy, which is a private independent Jewish high school in Waltham. And my question to you is, how have you engaged with colleagues and other volunteers who are people of color as well, but don't necessarily feel comfort with that like terminology? I am a little bit older than millennials. I'm just like above it, and so even I myself find some discomfort, or I'm trying to like figure out where I sit with that. So how have you navigated with that? Have there been complications? Has it been easy? Because I think younger people are more comfortable with that nomenclature, and if millennials are going to start to take leadership roles, there are Gen Xers who may still be at an uncomfortable place with it. So I'm just wondering if you've experienced that yet, or have had any kind of complications with that, or maybe some kind of connections or something like that.
So I think, there's a lot of conversation around the term people of color in general, and where it's useful and where it's not useful, right? And what it erases. I mean, I think, within the Asian community, we also talk about that with the term Asian American, and where it's useful and how it builds solidarity, and where it erases specific experiences, right? So, within workplaces, right, to just use people of color erases, anti-blackness and certain key pieces of the way, race plays out. And, sorry, not how race plays out, how, white supremacy and racism play out in all parts of our lives and in the structures that we are trying to dismantle. So, I think that, I guess to me, it's about how do we create a framework of people of color that's really about building shared struggle and shared empathy, but not overusing the term when we actually mean something more specific. Like, let's name it, right? Let's name, if it's all, Asian folks in the room, like, it's not a people of color space, right? I mean, that's just not what it is. And so I don't think it's useful to use the term people of color to just make ourselves feel better about what a room looks like or a space, but actually, how can it be a term that's around creating solidarity? And so, yeah, I don't know. That's like a broader answer, but I think it plays into, okay, if there are a lot of people of color in an organization, but there are no black folks, that's a problem. And that is a problem of white supremacy and racism. And we can't just say, oh, but we're this % people of color, so it's fine, right? I mean, obviously, I work for an organization that's, for and by Asian American folks. So I think, within our organization it's different, but within the broader spheres we're in, yeah. So how do we use that term in a useful way, but not just use it to kind of say, oh, okay, it's people of color space?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is my racial equity hat going on in the moment, is I'm from the Dominican Republic, and that's something that I struggle with my people all the time. No. And so I think about it, what you were saying about being empathetic is that one, it's not our job to get people to identify how we want them to identify. Like if they don't identify as a person of color, that's fine, but I'm sure that if I speak to somebody else who's from the Caribbean or from Latin America, even if they don't identify as a person of color, there's a shared experience, right? And so they don't have to identify that way or like speak the social justice lingo to understand where we are. And so I think that in a lot of places, we want people to use the words intersectionality and race and white supremacy, even if they have an understanding of them and they still just don't use those terms. And so right, so that's removing that responsibility of like, oh my God, you know, like how do you not identify as a person of color? But then also, racial identity development is like a developmental scale. And so when you start thinking about like, when you start understanding people's racial identity development, you understand that this person is in this place in their racial identity development, and that's fine. Everybody's where they are, and so eventually they'll move across the spectrum at some point, maybe they won't. But that's okay too. And so aligning our work more based on our shared experiences and less on like the literal jargon of social justice is like, you're not saying that you're like an intersectional Black feminist, but, right? But this and this and that. And so, you know, one, people are where they are. They are where they are in their racial identity development. Everybody doesn't use the same language that we use. And it's not our responsibility to get people to like, you know, move along.
Yep, so Kendra's available for consulting, and she's really good. So thank you for that. So we have one final question and one final response. So grand finale, and then I'll close this up really fast because there are snacks and relationship building and networking happening next. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Natalia. I work in a fitness sector, so Chevelle would love to talk to you a little bit later. Am I heard?
Yep.
Okay. My question, coming from a clearly white person, how do we build a healthy working connection between all races? Because I often find myself in a situation where I am excluded because I'm not part of people of color. You know, you're not a Black person. You're not an Asian person. You are a person with the privilege that I did not ask for, right? That I was born also with a white skin that I did not ask for. I do come from a different country, and I am short and I am female, which is also a certain category. But my question is, how do we build these connections that we don't exclude each other and we're not walking on eggshells around each other, and at the same time elevating each other?
So building connection and bridges across difference. What are your thoughts on how to do that?
I'll just
Kendra? Yeah, go ahead, Chevelle.
I'll just share a story. So we had a young man who graduated from the Harvard School of Public Health, and he was white, and he came to our farmers market, and he was like, I want to do some research here, because he wanted to study about food insecurity in Mattapan, and we're just like, oh no, another person that wants to go and research Mattapan and what's going to come out of this. So he was with us for that year, and he came to the farmers market one time, and then he showed up again, and we're like, oh, okay. And then he showed up for the rest of the 12 Saturdays that we had the farmers market. And then the next year, when his startup was getting really good because he developed a meal kit for food insecurity, he donated some money to our farmers market to help our farmers market manager out, and he still came to the farmers market. And even now, he's still making those connections with our farmers market manager. So for me, I think it's just trust. Us. Right now, it's like, if we don't know you, we're just like, okay, what are you trying to do? But if you keep showing up again and again, and you show you come with your true self, I think that can help build some connections.
Final word. Do you want to say one more thing? Go ahead.
My final thought around it is, and it might be personal, like for you in that moment, is that there's some work and some exploration that needs to be done about the feeling of exclusion, right? Particularly in a country where white people and white women are centered. And so there might be some exploration that you can do about that feeling of exclusion and where that comes from. I don't think that it's impossible to build across difference. I think that there is work there to be done, that you can definitely do that. And, you know, I think that doing work across difference requires us to do our own work and then do the work together. And so based on what you shared, you know, what's coming to me is how can you explore deeper those feelings of being excluded, particularly when you live in a place where your identity is centered in those moments? And what does it bring up for you when there are other people that are different races and maybe different genders having like affinity spaces in those places? I think that that would be fruitful, something fruitful to explore.
Thank you. All right, so it's my job to first wrap us up and thank this panel of brilliant leaders. They're leading the way in Boston. I hope we see a lot more of you leading the way in the Boston and find each other to help each other build the path that way. Thank you so much for coming tonight and engaging and sharing your ideas, also your questions. And I hope you hang out and get to know each other a bit so we can leverage each other and rise. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.